Hi, welcome to the Kate Daly Show. How are you guys today? I have a special guest. Yay! I have two special guests, actually. You might not see JC Hall sitting over here, but KrisAnne Hall is here. And of course, she comes on the show every single week, and I love that. And bringing her brilliance to the show and the common sense. And today, you were live in studio, and so we talked all kinds of stuff about the founding, and you were really inspiring, too. And we, I have to laugh because she was just talking about her white privilege card hasn't done much for her. Hasn't done much for me either. But apparently we have one, and it's supposed to work, but we got gypped apparently. And this is kind of the talking point right now, as far as you have Black Lives Matters and you have all of the craziness and nonsense of nobody knowing real history. That's a huge, huge problem. And so, we were talking about this because people don't understand the founding. They don't understand the heroes and the founding and who we should be highlighting and talking about. And they want to bypass all that so that the narrative of victimhood and the narrative of, retribution and all of these things come into play. And it's so dishonest. It really is that dishonest. And I don't know, it must make you cringe because you talk about the founding consistently. She's our constitutional expert and attorney, KrisAnneHall.com, by the way. Go there. You're going to get highly, highly educated. And it must drive you nuts. You're giving talks all over the country every week about the founding, which I love that you're doing this. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I love being on the show with you, but it's even more fun to be in studio. And, we've been teaching here. JC and I have been teaching here for the last 2 days. JC has one more class tonight I'm excited about.
Nice.
And we do what we do because it's love, seriously.
Yeah.
And the love that I have motivates me into a righteous anger that these people are able to monopolize the airwaves, monopolize and manipulate our education into alienating an entire segment of the American population. By the way, an entire segment of the American population who have more to rejoice over the history in America than they do to condemn.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Why can't people get this? It's like the perspective is shot and that narrative has taken hold. And here we sit and we're just rich with all of this amazing history that we've done these amazing things as a country early on. And nobody wants to talk about it.
So this morning here in Washington, Utah, I taught one of my favorite classes called The Forgotten Founders, where I go through the minorities and the women who built America. And some people say, well, that's KrisAnne. She just cherry picked. She found some tokens and she, publicizes them.
I hate that.
But in reality, Kate, I'm just scratching the surface. And I'm not talking about just, the Americans of African descent that were here. I'm talking about people who were absolutely essential, that if they had not existed in the time, the place, and accomplished the things that they'd accomplished, we would still probably be British.
Yeah.
I mean, these people, men of African descent, women in general. Let me read to you. We were going to talk about one of the men of African descent, a very young man. But I want to start off, Kate, with a story. The women in our revolutionary period were a formidable force. They were soldiers. They were patriots. They were militiamen. They were political advisors. They were fighters. Right? They were educators. That's who they were. And most people don't realize, but after the Boston Tea Party, the women started holding their own tea parties. And they began in the home of Elizabeth King in Edenton, North Carolina, spearheaded by a woman by the name of Penelope Barker.
Okay. And
she pulled together these women. They call themselves the aforesaid ladies. And they protested the government's commerce mandates. Because, I hate to get down to the brass basics here, but we did not go to war with Great Britain over a tax on tea. Yeah. Okay, that's not why.
So true.
It's just that.
I know.
Of all the ridiculous
Thank you, fourth grade history
points to throw out there, that's one of them. So Penelope brought these women together. And let me read to you her battle cry.
Okay.
Now, these are the words. This is Penelope Barker, October 23rd, 1774. Maybe it has only been the men who have protested the king up to now. That only means we women have taken too long to let our voices be heard. She said, we are signing our name to a document, not hiding ourselves behind costumes like the men in Boston did at their Tea Party.
Ooh,
the government
nice.
will know who we are.
Wow.
So your gender studies teacher in your liberal arts college trying to tell you that the women of our revolutionary period were weak, oppressed victims of the overbearing, misogynistic, abusive men of society, never given any credit, never given any
until the
value.
right to vote. Yes.
These women actually stood up and called out the men of the Boston freaking Tea Party for being scaredy cats for hiding behind costumes.
Wow.
They signed their name to a petition, first and last name, sent it to the government declaring that they would purchase none of the English goods that were mandated by law. Committing treason.
Wow.
First and last names, but sending not only their names, right? When they send their first and last names, who else are they sending?
Right.
The men and their families.
Wow.
When you go to the Historical Society of Edenton, North Carolina, you see the list, and they tell you not only were these women just bold like that, the men on the list, the majority of names they implicated were British merchants.
Wow.
So these women, upon their protest, had to know that these men were not going to keep their jobs for long.
Sure.
But not only that, they themselves are committing treason and implicating their families in treason, which means these men, as soon as they're fired, can be shot.
Right. Right.
So what are they telling us, Kate? They're telling us that the women had the courage to publicly stand while the men were still hiding behind makeup and feathers.
Yeah. And wigs.
And that liberty is worth more than a paycheck. And it's worth more than the lives of the men who bring it home. Now, shortly after the British government, the British soldiers had won a really big battle. I mean, like, we're going to win this whole thing now. Big celebration. Yeah. Big celebration. One of the soldiers under General Cornwallis came up to Cornwallis and said, I don't think we should be so quick to be celebrating. I mean, it was a big deal, but I don't know if it was that big of a deal.
Right.
And the record of the history says, this was actually a letter to General Cornwallis, May 20th, 1781. He said he believed that if we had destroyed all the men in North America, we shall have enough to do to conquer the women.
Whoa. Wild. I've never heard that.
We were such the women, in the eyes of the British military, were a more formidable force than the men.
Wow. Part of the spy ring, everything. Wow. Yeah.
Put that in your pipe, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and smoke it.
If she's alive.
The ghost of Ruth Bader
Ginsburg. The ghost
Ginsburg.
of Ruth Bader. Oh, wow.
But you had specifically asked me about this man.
Yeah.
So what is the narrative that we're teaching in the textbooks in the schools?
Right. And the one that they want to implement was 1619 Project.
Yeah. That the people who founded America, the people who fought for our independence, were a bunch of rich, elite, white, slave-owning men that only overthrew Great Britain because they wanted to consolidate power to themselves. And so they would have the power to oppress other people. Well, this just eliminates, like, hundreds of people from real truth history. So true. And I love this man because and I call him a man because boys don't do what this man did. I love this man because he turns all of that narrative on its head and proves the lie of it. His name is James Forten, and I'm particularly jealous of James Forten, and I'm amazing. Now, James Forten was a young man of African descent. His grandparents were slaves, but his parents were born free. Okay. So James was born free. Now, what makes me envious of James is that when James was 14 years old, he stood in the streets of Philadelphia and heard the Declaration of Independence read publicly for the first time ever. Can you imagine? No, I can't imagine that. A young black man, 14 years old, who sees... Declaring all mankind is free. Sees slavery still around him, knows that people are becoming free everywhere of all colors and creeds. a public declaration that every member of mankind is born and created with inalienable rights. I can't even imagine. This was so inspirational for James at 14 years old that he joined the Patriot Navy and served to fight for liberty, right? Mm-hmm. His ship was actually captured by a British Navy ship. Mm-hmm. He was thrown as a prisoner, a prisoner of war, into the ship's prison hold. Now, the captain of the British ship fell fond of James Fortin and invited him to come to England and live with him.
Okay.
He said, James, young man, why don't you come out of that prison cell, renounce your country, renounce what you're doing, and come live with me. You will live in a home of great wealth and splendor. You will have comfort that you will could never even comprehend. Now, mind you, before you get too hopeful, you're going to be a servant to my son. But let me explain to you, you will have greater wealth and privilege as a servant to my son than you will have as a freeman in this place.
Wow.
Now let's set the scene here, Kate. A 14-year-old boy in a British prison hold of a ship. This is not like your county jail where you get a cot and three hots and a cot. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're in a dank, dark bottom of a ship dungeon, rats and disease, no food, no water. You're 14. What kind of an offer is that?
Right.
What kind of offer is that? What's even more amazing is that James Fortin said no. I would rather be a poor freeman.
I just got chills. Yeah. Wow.
Than be a slave in your palace. Here are his words. I've been taken prisoner for the liberties of my country and will never prove a traitor to her interests. Where's Black Lives Matter in this history?
Yeah.
This kind of courage, this kind of virtue, this kind of character ought to be held up by every family. This should be who the fathers of our young Black children say, you need to be a man like James.
Amen.
To our daughters, you need to be, have sons like this.
Right.
You need to be in families like this. This is the character of America. See, this is who we are.
Yeah.
This is not the lies and the narrative that comes from the people who sow division and hate. We have James Fortin and many like him, regardless of the color of their skin. They didn't see the color of their skin. They didn't see man. They didn't see woman. What they saw was we are united in liberty, which is a righteous cause. And there you have it.
Powerful.
Thomas Paine said it's not in numbers that we gather our strength. It is in unity. And that's where we live today. That's what we have the opportunity to have, Kate. We need to set aside. You know why they sow division amongst the people? So you don't actually come together and realize who the enemy actually is. You keep fighting with each other. This group, that group, right?
Right.
We
Absolutely.
hate this group. We hate this group. We hate this group. Mm-hmm. They hate us.
Right.
We all are born with the same liberty.
Well,
and it's the liberty. The enemy is destroying the liberty, not us.
Yeah. When you're talking about liberty, you can feel the truth emanate from it. When you're talking about Black Lives Matters, what feeling do you walk away with? You walk away with being mad, angry, violent, incensed, selfish. I want, you owe me, and I'm a victim, and a lot more hatred. It's kind of amazing that people can't recognize that for what it is. You're talking about this story of this man. We have to call him a man.
Yes.
This man, this 14-year-old boy that displayed more courage in his little pinky than most will ever manifest in their lifetime.
Not in that movement anyway.
Yeah. And my gosh, there's you don't walk away angry, do you? You don't walk away feeling those feelings. And I hope people recognize those feelings that that these kinds of things bring, because that's going to be very important in our future to identify that as we move forward, because you're going to know where the truth and where the lies are. Mm-hmm. And it's huge.
You talked about, you have the feelings of selfishness and want and anger, and entitlement and anger and hate. Liberty doesn't emanate those emotions. Why?
Neither does God.
Because liberty emanates a love for your neighbor.
Yes,
our founders did not pledge life, fortune, and sacred honor to win liberty for themselves. And they said this over and over again. They had there are phrases that are repeated through the writings of multiple founders. And one of the phrases that is repeated over and over again is that they said, "We are doing this," quote, "for ages and millions yet unborn." I want us to grasp that. They were willing to die on the field. James Fortin was willing to die in that ship so that someone 100 years from now that he would never even know would be able to be free from the king throwing him in a prison ship without due process. We need to develop a long-term vision. We need to understand what winning and losing actually means.
Yeah.
And we need to work real hard, Kate.
And real quick.
On redeveloping the character of who America is.
Amen. This is why I have KrisAnne Hall on my show. This is why she comes every week. KateDalleyRadio.com, KrisAnneHall.com, Liberty First University is amazing. I can't even say enough about it. I can't say enough about it because it's just so amazing. You've got to get educated there. Liberty First University, KrisAnneHall.com. She goes to the White House. She's been on C-SPAN. What a gift. And thank you.
Thank you, Kate. It's been such a pleasure spending the day
with you. I
walk
out of here today feeling really good, and I really appreciate that. It's a rarity. Right now, it's so rare. Thanks, you guys.